Okay, thanks, John. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Yeah, as John said, I'm going to have a quick run through extra thoughts, perhaps, on financial forecasting and budgeting in the current climate, and then also home in on mainly the new job support scheme, which starts on Sunday and will run for 6 months. So financial forecasting then, I mean, obviously, it's not just for large companies. Everyone should be doing that and budgeting, and probably in the current climate have thought more about it. So undoubtedly, you could be worried about your current cash position. Inevitably, you're going to be uncertain about the scale of the impact of COVID on your business, and you're not alone like that. Everybody is going to feel like that. The benefit of having an accurate and reliable cash flow forecast budget is that that's going to help you going forward. And if you haven't done it, then the sooner perhaps that you tackle that, the better, I would suggest. Before you begin, you want to be equipped with as many facts and figures as you can. And what have you got to rely on there? Well, to some extent, you've got your history. If you've been trading for a while, obviously, you will have a fair idea of how your activity has gone. But it won't be particularly sensible to sit down and say, oh, well, last year's sales were X, therefore, based on that, next year's sales are going to be Y. It's got to be a little bit different to take account of the current circumstances. I have also thought that it's probably a good idea to, before you get into the nitty-gritty of producing a spreadsheet of that, talk to people. If you've got business colleagues, absolutely talk to them, your advisors, and take stock of what the media and everybody else is saying. And don't get panicked by that, but obviously take all these things into account before you get into, as I say, into the nitty-gritty of doing it. Obviously, you need to consider the financial impact of losing clients or customers. That could well happen in the coming months, might already have happened to you. Inevitably, there could be delayed receipts coming from your customers as they suffer from cash flow problems as well. And in producing a decent forecast of cash flow, you'll produce pinch points. They'll produce pinch points. And I'll come on to that, about those are the areas really that you want to tackle hard. So I would start, if you come into this cold, I would start with a 6-month rolling forecast, and you update it at least once a month. If you find that you want to get into it more detailed than that and you've got time, then you could do it weekly, but that's probably a bit too much. As I say, 6 months, update it on a monthly basis. And that will always ensure that you've got visibility of your current cash requirements and where it's going for at least the next quarter ahead, which is I think that's the best way to firefight, really, in the current climate. Use specific calculations and base your incomings and outgoings on realistic assumptions to start with. Don't be tempted to be overly pessimistic. Certainly, I find it difficult for anybody to be overly optimistic about how the business is going to do in the next coming months, but be realistic about it. To start with, in building up numbers, you should be able to accurately account for the majority of your costs. Certainly, if you've got employees, you'll know what your payroll costs are going to be. If you've got mortgage or rent liabilities, you'll know what they are. Most of your utility costs you'll be able to estimate, because generally speaking, overheads don't vary too much. And if they do vary, then they vary in line with your sales. So if you know that I'm not going to be doing so much work, then certain overheads will fall because of that, then obviously build that in. But I would tackle it that way up, rather than diving into the sales and saying, all right, okay, what happens if we only have X, Y sales? Because the sales is going to be difficult to budget for. And you will be able to rely on historic data, but not as much as in previous times, I would say. Probably useful to communicate, I would think, with your key customers and certainly your key suppliers, because then you can know as far as is possible when you might receive sales receipts and when you might have to make payments. And I think certainly suppliers are going to be open to you talking to them about things. They'll like to engage with you on it, I should think, because they're going to be in the same boat. So you'll be able to produce what I would call your realistic template, and if it's in the form of a good spreadsheet, and if you need to get some spreadsheet skills on board, then that might help. But if it's in a good format, you can then test it and you can then tweak it by deciding, all right, what happens if I put the sales down 20%? What happens if I put the sales down 50%? Or what happens if the sales actually are 25% better than what I thought they were? And that will all produce a series of pinch points going forwards. And typically, for small businesses, they tend to come, if you're VAT registered, they'll come in the month when you have to pay VAT to the VAT man. Twice a year, if you're self-employed, they're likely to come when you're paying tax to the tax man. If you're a company, there's going to be a corporation tax bill once a year if you're making profits. Those all inevitably produce pinch points, and that's the areas you want to tackle. So what are the supports available for pinch points? Well, we've got this job support scheme, which is taking over from the furlough. So I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. You've got various deferral mechanisms at the moment being offered by the government. The VAT deferral is still in place. The one where you may have taken advantage of already, essentially quarter two's VAT payment for 2020, you were allowed to defer until the 31st of March 2021. In the last few weeks, the government have said that actually when you come to pay that, you will have the option of either paying them on the 31st by the 31st of March 2021, or if you like, you can have an interest-free instalment arrangement to repay it over 12 months from then. That could prove very useful. So we obviously build that in if you feel you need to. And then, as I said, talk to suppliers about prioritizing. Oh, you prioritize your payments. Talk to suppliers and try to phase them in, all with the idea of smoothing things as much as you can. Bounce back loans still available. I know a lot of people have taken them and are just sitting on them. Not a bad idea in the scheme of things. Very favourable repayment terms there as a kind of backstop. Of course, they have to only be used for business purposes. You need to make sure you're aware of that. There could be problems if you use the bounce back loan for paying personal credit cards or personal debts off, because at some point the business is going to have to account for that. So once you understand your cash flow position and you manage it regularly, you're better equipped to deal with the non-financial impacts of the current climate, and there are plenty of those as well, clearly. Okay, job support scheme. Well, this starts as